I wanted to circle back, if we could.
Mark, can you rephrase that without using the term circle back?
Sure. Earlier you had said,
Without referencing the earlier.
I know, that face wasn't for you, it was me contemplating. And also making faces at Peter, but that's just it.
I'm John Wynn with Lee's Sandwiches. We're at the Asian Corner Mall in Charlotte, North Carolina. Mom started basically a cart in a supermarket. She kind of saved money to open our current shop now. My mom and my dad started the business back in 2005. Been here for almost 14, 15 years. The mall here used to be one of the first malls in Charlotte. There was a lot of Asian stores here until technology changed. A lot of DVD shops, record shops. With the location here, we would love if we can stay here forever. It just feels like you're in a different place, almost like you're in Vietnam. It gives you that atmosphere that you're trying to, I guess, find in a different country, and we like that feel. My dad came in 75. My mom came in 79. They met here in Charlotte at a grocery store. They both worked together at a textile plant in Charlotte for a number of years. They came to the U.S. because of the war. My dad was with the services in South Vietnam. When Saigon fell, he escaped on a U.S. ship. My mom was a refugee. She came through Cambodia. Basically just looking for peace and a new start. It was a rough start just because they basically had the clothes on their back. I couldn't imagine, starting somewhere new, no family, with almost no money. I remember stories of my dad telling me that when he was picking apples, he was making probably $2, a day. He didn't own a car. He was walking to places. He was telling me he was walking, to work miles. It's one of those old man stories you would hear. You will, walk 10 miles in the snow, and I can see that happening with my dad. I'm gonna probably stick around for a little while. Got a lot of pressures from a lot of the local chefs to not close the shop. We have a lot of chefs that come in. They don't announce their chefs until I find out from social media, but probably our main supporter is Chef Kindred. He's always been there for us, always telling where to get banh mi if anybody's asking. He's pretty much a mentor to me, somebody to look up.
Tom,
Good to be here.
thanks for coming out. Well, especially here. So Lee's Banh Mi's one of my favorite sandwich shops in Charlotte. And we're here at the Asian Corner Mall. Obviously, this is a repurposed building. Do you know
This was
the
a
background?
Woolco shopping center back in the 60s. Woolco was an offshoot of Woolworth, same way that Kmart was an offshoot of Kresge. And they built a whole bunch of kind of bottom of the food chain shopping malls. And this one was vacant for a long time. And then a Vietnamese grocery store began the rebirth. And that's how it became Asian Corner Mall, I think, back in the early 2000s.
Okay, that was you beat me to what the next question was going to be. So this Woolco thing sort of predated the mall explosion of the early 70s into the 80s.
It was part of that. We built way more shopping malls than we needed, and that in some ways is a very bad thing. There's a lot of sprawl, there's a lot of vacant shopping malls, but if you're a small business person, those old strip malls are the place you want to start a business.
The Central Mall is flanked by a well-balanced selection of retail stores in every field and price bracket, which provides all customers with the most complete comparative shopping in the entire area.
You have a history of, or a fascination with shopping malls in general?
Well, I'm really interested in how cities get built, and I worked for Levine Museum of the New South on that for a long time. But before that, I worked for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Historic Landmarks Commission, and my job was to basically figure out how Charlotte got to be Charlotte. And a lot of that is way back in the day, looking at streetcar suburbs and people coming in for the work in the textile mills and all of that. But history never stops. And so looking at shopping malls getting built, particularly in the 50s and 60s and 70s, is interesting to me just as itself, but also because it really sets the stage for this international food explosion that we have seen in Charlotte in the last 25 years.
Is it because Charlotte is opening, you know, as sort of these people come back in towards city center and then all these neighborhoods start getting regentrified? Is that why we're sort of getting an exposure, do you think?
Well, it's useful if you're coming particularly from the Northeast to realize that there were almost no immigrants here 25, 30 years ago. This was an area that pretty much missed the last big immigrant boom in the late 19th century, early 20th century. People did not come to the South because it was poor. They went to Utica, booming Utica, New York, and Pittsburgh and Detroit and those kind of places. And so when I got here in 1981, you could not get a bagel in Charlotte. You couldn't even get what I considered a decent slice of pizza. And the transformation has been, well, it started in the 90s. And it's just been ramping up and ramping up. The Brookings Institution back in the 90s said we were the 4th fastest growing Latino city in the United States. It wasn't just Latinos, it was folks coming from all over the place. And the last statistics that I've seen, which go up through 2013, we are the #1 fastest growing Latino center among America's big cities.
The one thing that I've always expected before I got here, I always say especially, is when I got to Charlotte, I expected there to be barbecue on every corner, you know? And it's interesting that for a city like Charlotte, one of the largest, you know, the largest in the state, and being a banking hub and all that, you would think though that there would be more barbecue in this town until recently, as it's starting to explode. What has been the predominant cuisine since you've been here far longer than me? And now we're seeing the explosion, but what's been the dominant for those years early on?
Kathleen Purvis at the Charlotte Observer just wrote a wonderful appreciation of the Meat and Three restaurant, which was the standard restaurant when I got here. You order a main dish and then you get 2 or 3 vegetables, and macaroni and cheese is a vegetable. Banana pudding is a vegetable. In addition to green beans and collard greens and all of that kind of thing. And that was the predominant food that's working people's food. Barbecue is really celebration food. Used to be that you only had barbecue at harvest time. In the fall, you'd butcher the hogs and get ready for the winter, and you'd set aside one hog to have this celebration. Well, as folks became more urban, they had celebration food more times of the year. But in Charlotte, there's always been a real dichotomy between the well-to-do folks and the mass of folks. And in Charlotte, there's, until recently, not been much of a barbecue culture.
Yeah,
because that was seen as more working class, and it's changing now, which is a great thing.
So besides the Meat and Three, as far as like cuisine coming from outside of, you know, the direct influence being from their homelands as opposed to being homogenized over, you know, a couple of decades or hundreds of years, is depending upon the case. What was sort of our predominant immigrant cuisine here in Charlotte originally?
Well, if you go way back, there are 3 population groups that create Southern cuisine. One is Native American people. Corn is a really important Southern food. That's a Native American food. And then there's the European, Scots, Irish, English kind of thing going on. Some Germans, Lutheran churches are Germans. Liver mush.
Chow chow
Is German.
Liver mush is
mush is an old German food. It was called Panhas when it was in Germany. So you had all of those, and then you had African cuisine. And so all of those swirl together to create Southern cuisine 200 years ago. And then when the rest of the United States has a lot of immigrants, about all we get in the late 19th century, early 20th century are Greek folks. And the Greek folks are fascinating for foodies because on one hand, they end up running a lot of the fruit stands first and then a lot of the restaurants. When I came to Charlotte, nearly every restaurant was Greek run. But they were folks who really put a premium on assimilating. They kept their own culture at home. They had the beautiful Greek Orthodox Church in the Dilworth neighborhood, But when it came to restaurants, they tried to do Southern. And a lot of what we think of as the Southern Meat and Three restaurant is really a Greek-run version of Mama's home cooking in the South. And so when I came to Charlotte, that was the predominant food. You could not even find Greek food at Greek restaurants, with an exception maybe of souvlaki or baklava for dessert. And so it's only really since the 1990s that we've started to have many different kinds of ethnicities purveying their food in terms of grocery stores, in terms of restaurants.
I want to backtrack real quick. So where are you from originally?
Where am I from originally? My dad was a history professor, so we kind of bounced around. I was born in the south side of Chicago, grew up in the mountains of Virginia, ended up going to high school in a town called Cortland, New York, a little dairy farming town. And Charlotte is probably the biggest city I ever lived in.
Outside of Chicago, though.
Outside of, well, I was very young at the time. I was born there, but I just wanted to be near my mom. So.
Right. So I guess in a nutshell, how did you go from all of that to end up in Charlotte?
Well, I got really energized in a negative way by urban renewal. This notion in the 60s and 70s that if we just tore down big chunks of our cities, they would be better. And in upstate New York, that seemed really foolish because there wasn't money to build back things. And so I got energized around the issue of historic preservation, learned a little bit of architecture, a little bit of urban history. And in 1981, I was coming out of college, coming out of a master's program, and looking for a place that would hire somebody like that. And Charlotte had a 14-month grant, 1981. I can only count to 10. I'm really hoping we haven't come up on the 14 months yet, but I'm still here.
Off that same grant, basically?
Well, you know, the 14 months ran out, and then the Historic Landmarks Commission here hired me on for a little bit longer, and I did some freelance, and eventually worked for Levine Museum of the New South for about 16 years.
The term salad bowl suburbia is something that I came across when I was looking at your website. As somebody who loved sociology when I was in college, I don't think that's a term I've ever come across. Is that a neologism for you? Is that something you made up?
I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to put my arms around what Charlotte is. And we don't have a Latino neighborhood. We don't have a Vietnamese neighborhood. We didn't have a Greek town or a Chinatown or a Little Italy. Instead, we've got this mixture. And it's not in the Lower East Side of New York, you know, the old tenement neighborhood. It's out in this kind of 50s, 60s, 70s suburb land, like where we are right now. And salad bowl suburbs seems to fit. We're not a melting pot. We're not distinct neighborhoods. We're a salad bowl. In a salad bowl, you can still see the lettuce and the tomatoes and the onions and the anchovies, but it's a new dish. And that's what we are.
It was a brilliant phrase. Like, as soon as I read it, I knew exactly what you meant. And I'm like, wow, why is this not a thing already? You know, like, this should have been in the vernacular when I was in college. Like, I was surprised that
it's been picked up a couple of places. Southern Foodways Alliance has a book called The Larder, which is about food geography in the United States. It's in there. John T. Edge did a really nice piece for the New York Times about it. But you can find it yourself. Go down Central Avenue and go to the corner of Central and Rosehaven, just kind of randomly. There are a lot of other places like this. Park once, you can go to Mexico, El Salvador, Lebanon, Vietnam, Ethiopia, and Somalia, all in one nest of shopping centers. And that's the Charlotte pattern. My daughter lives in Chicago. There is still a Chinatown in Chicago, but if you go out towards the 60s, 70s suburbia, this same salad bowl pattern's happening. So I think Charlotte, because it had very few immigrants back in the day, it's easier to see this new urban geography that is who we are, not just as Southerners, but as Americans. And that's an exciting Charlotte thing.
My name is Manuel Manolo Betancourt. Well, it's like Manuel, and people call me Manolo. It's like William and Bill. I'm originally from Colombia, South America. I was I came to this country in 2000, 19 years ago. I was married to the daughter of the founders of this bakery. The bakery was founded in 97 by the grandparents of my son and daughter. It used to be called Las Delicias. Almost for 20 years was called Las Delicias. This is the churros tres leches filling with peaches, and every churro has a caramel. The bakery keeps growing. We have an average of 22% growing by yearly. And we are almost in 100 stores around North Carolina and Virginia. Gosh, man, I love everything about Charlotte except ice. One of the things I most like about Charlotte is the size of the city. It's not that big like New York, or it's not that small like small towns here in the States. It's just the size are perfect. But the future that my kids have in this city, the sense of community, all the flavors that we have over here, the progressive, it's a very progressive city. In some ways, it's very cosmopolitan. So, gosh, man, I love this city. I don't want to leave this city. The only bad thing that I feel that we have over here is the presence of ICE that is hurting our community, and the silence of some of our local leaders. That's the biggest lie ever, that we don't pay taxes or that we are here just to steal jobs. Anyone who wants to apply to come here to work, more than welcome. I'm always looking for people. Exactly, well, but that's Central Avenue. I laugh when people talk, oh, I gotta go to New York because I want to, eat in this restaurant because I want to have a different flavor. I said, man, you're wasting your money. You just go to Central Avenue and you have a flavors from all around the world. So this is the most amazing area of town, man. I won't change East Charlotte for anything. I love East Charlotte.
When we talk about Latino community in Charlotte, that's a very broad brushstroke to paint. I mean, that's a large, rich culture that we're speaking about.
It's not a culture. It's multiple cultures. And it's funny talking to people who I would identify as Latino. They say, I'd never heard of a Latino until I came here. When I was back home, I was Mexican or Guatemalan. They're two different things. There's a wonderful Guatemalan bakery here called Panaderia El Quetzal up near Garinger High School. Folks from Venezuela, folks from Colombia, folks from Peru. What's now Manolo's Bakery on Central Avenue was originally Las Delicias. That was an empty building when I was here in the early 90s. And then Xenia Martinez and her parents started a Mexican bakery there. There was nothing like that here.
Yeah, tell me about this bakery, because this is...
It's wonderful. It is now a Mexican-Colombian bakery because it's been taken over by Manolo Betancourt. He's from Colombia. And yes, there are multiple kinds of traditions there. When you go there, ask what they have for breakfast. And they have the little fried empanadas and things that are popular in Colombia. They also have the pan, the baked goods that are popular in Mexico. Wonderful tres leches cake. Don't have that for breakfast. You'll go to sleep the rest of the day. But the Manolo's Bakery, so it brings together Mexican people, non-Mexican people, and non-Latino people. It has become a real beacon on the east side, on Central Avenue. Manolo is a political leader in the Democratic Party, and part of what makes an immigrant community become part of all of our community. And that's how you got here, and that's how I got here.
You talk about having
it's
voice,
happened again.
having somebody that's got a voice for you within the local government. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I believe in the American dream, man. I came to chase the American dream, and I still believe the American dream is still alive. You just, like always, you need to work hard to achieve your dreams, but you need to gotta make a plan, feel the plan, just, the law of attraction.
What are you excited about right now, food-wise? Like, what have you run across that you've not had before, and you're like, this is my jam right now?
A lot of Indian and South Asian restaurants. Charlotte has a very strong community coming here from India, from Pakistan, from the countries nearby. A lot of them work in the information technology finance in the research parks up north of UNC Charlotte. So if you go up the Mallard Creek, W.T. Harris kind of corridor, you can eat at 5 or 6 different Indian cuisines.
I know, like, there's those sort of hidden shopping areas uptown. You know, the sky bridges and
Right.
all that stuff. Do you get around uptown much? Do you do any of those sort of excursions into those
Yeah,
little areas?
there's a bunch of food trucks. I love the halal Latino food trucks. They started out on Independence, and they have a brick and mortar restaurant. They started with the brick and mortar restaurant, and now they're doing the food truck thing. So that's pretty cool. But if you know where to look, there is Ethiopian food downtown. There is a variety of sort of hole-in-the-wall restaurants, but you have to look hard because the rent's expensive. And so if you're interested in figuring out where international vitality is in Charlotte, don't start downtown. Start out in the burbs and start out in the burbs that are not stylish. One of my favorite restaurants in Charlotte is called the Cooking Pot African Kitchen. It's a woman named Esther Akuru, and she's from Nigeria. She was in the healthcare industry and wanted to bring some of her culture into what she did every day. And so she's doing a healthy eating Nigerian restaurant in a strip shopping center that the rent must have been inexpensive because there's a thrift store next door that actually went out of business just recently.
Oh, wow.
A couple of not expensive kind of general stores, and it was a place that was cut off when they were rebuilding Independence. And I always look for those kind of places.
The places like Independence where things get cut off?
Yeah,
Because you know the rent's going to go down.
because the rent's going to go down.
I'm from Nigeria, Benin City, to be precise. And I've been in the States for over 20 years. And I love to eat African food. Well, when I came, I was with my whole family, so they chose Charlotte, I just followed. So it wasn't a choice for me to make at that time. So, but ever since coming to Charlotte, no regrets. Well, the Cooking Pot is an authentic African restaurant, and any meal you get here, you can guarantee that is the meal that any African would eat on a given day. You never go wrong with the jollof rice. The jollof rice is the life of the party. Okay, so they have a lot of saying in Africa that if you have a party and there's no jollof rice, you're having a meeting. The jollof rice must be there no matter what. So many, I can't satisfy everybody because I'm not jollof rice. So you must have the jollof rice. We don't compromise on our ingredients. We believe that if you come to an ethnic restaurant to eat, you should adjust your palate to accommodate our food instead of us accommodating and adjusting our food to accommodate your palate. From my mom and grandma. No, not officially. There's really no culinary school in Africa to teach you how to cook an African food. You learn from home, like how to cook. And by the time you're grown, a teenager, you don't know how to cook. From an African culture, your parents just didn't train you well. They didn't bring you up properly. So there's no culinary school to go to learn how to cook African food. You just learn it at home. Yeah. I mean, I had an idea that people didn't know anything about the menu, but I didn't know I was going to be teaching a class every time somebody comes in because I have to go through the whole process. And some people have never even seen plantains. And I'm like, really? Is that bad? So it's like I give a tutorial every time somebody comes in. You know, I try to explain. And Luckily, the people that have come in, they've enjoyed it and they keep coming back. So the explanation is it's not as bad as it used to be. Thank goodness, it's a mixture from people from all over. That was my aim. That was my own. That was the whole point. That even though it's an African restaurant, I don't want to cater to only Africans. I want to cater to everybody. I want everybody to come taste African food, to come see what African food is all about, to taste our flavor profile, to understand us better as a people. We've made adjustments, but we would never deny who we are. And we will stand by that. We're an African restaurant and we'll make it authentic any day, anytime.
What kind of cuisine can I expect to find at a Nigerian cooking pot restaurant?
Well, the building block is rice. They grew rice on the coast there, and that's one of the reasons that rice ended up as a big thing in the Charleston area, was that enslaved people came from that part of the world, literally.
Is it a specific kind of rice that they're using? Is it like a
Could be.
Okay.
Esther Akuru will know that. The preparation is called jollof rice. And jollof rice is a little bit of, it's red. And exactly why it's red, I don't know. But it is the ancestor of a lot of the rice dishes in the New Orleans area, the gumbos and those kind of things.
You're saying it was born from this?
Yeah.
Okay.
And spicy with meat and a lot of rice, a little bit of meat. That's the Nigerian thing. If you put too much meat in, the Nigerians think you're messing with tradition.
I'm all for that anyways. like I said before, I like my meat as a condiment.
Yeah.
Now.
And you will like the Nigerian food. And also with the Nigerian food, the meat is toothsome. It's not the kind of fall away from the bone thing that we have. It's meat that Esther Akuru works real hard at sourcing responsibly. And so it's got a little bit more texture to it than the kind of farm-raised meat that we're used to.
When you say toothsome, so you're gonna work it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. It's not tough, but in the culture I grew up with, the premium was placed on meat that you could pretty much eat with a spoon.
Right.
And that's not what Nigerian folks want. And just fascinated to get into these fine points of what makes a good dish. It's different in different parts of the world. And so by having a little bit of jollof rice, you're getting inside somebody's skin a little bit.
We talk about Charlotte constantly reinventing itself. And I think part of that is this welcoming aspect that not only do people that already live here have towards other people. And I think that my experience, or what I feel is that it spills out from almost every little subset that we have in Charlotte, for the most part, where people are very welcoming. I don't know if that attitude is because we have a large influx of immigrants coming here and they feel welcome, or if it's, the other way around.
Well, Charlotte's a city of newcomers, and it's always been a city of newcomers. We've grown in every single decade since the 1850s when the railroads came, and we've done that by welcoming new people, partnering with new people. As long as they want to make money, they can probably find somebody to hook up with in Charlotte. Dilworth, the neighborhood. Edward Dilworth Latta was not from Charlotte. Came here, partnered with another guy, and eventually the streetcar system, the Dilworth neighborhood happens. Hugh McCall was from Bennettsville, South Carolina, a little country town. Came here, got pulled into the orbit of what became NCNB, and became the guy that invented Bank of America, first coast-to-coast bank. And so I think immigrants are a subset of Charlotte's general reality, in which there's not the kind of entrenched old line elite. There's a little bit of that, but nowhere near the way it would be in a Charleston or probably even a Chicago.
True.
And so if you've got the energy to create something, you can probably find somebody to work with on it. And that's how we all become better.
Well, Tom, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
I'm starving at this point, man. We're sitting here and all these places are lighting up. Thank you so much for your time and your insight on everything. It's been a great interview.
Thank you. Thank you for what Order Fire does. This is really impressive.
Sit down and talk to people.
Yeah.
It's a good time.
That's what builds community. Probably should make like one more thing because we're gonna drive the editor crazy because we've been talking and having fun.
All right, Jeff, cut it.